Could I ask you why Gavin was banned? Was there a specific thing that he did, or was it his association with the Proud Boys?
It's association with the Proud Boys.
You know, he's abandoned that. He's not only that, he's disassociated himself with it and said that it completely got out of hand and he doesn't want to have anything to do with it.
A few moments later.
So it was just his association with the Proud Boys.
I don't recall, and I would have to go back, and I don't want to misstate things.
Was it his association with the Proud Boys?
It's association with the Proud Boys.
You know,
one of the things you do if there's somebody that you suspect is you increase their cognitive load during the interrogation, and there's no way you can prepare for that.
Let's pretend some money's missing.
Yeah. If I said to you, is there any reason somebody would have told me that they saw you near that cash box about the time it went missing?
Dum, dum, dum.
Okay, now, people talk at 125 words a minute. They think at 12 to 1,400 words a minute. Now, if it takes you five seconds to tell me no, you took the money.
Ooh.
Because if
I'm
you
getting
weren't
nervous right now.
Because if you didn't take it, you know you didn't take it. You don't need to run scenarios through your head to think, who could have seen me? What could it have been? I mean, I didn't see anybody. Nobody could have seen me. But if you didn't do it, it doesn't take you 1 millisecond to say, absolutely not.
Has law enforcement ever asked you to keep certain people on the platform even after they've violated your rules?
Not that I'm aware.
You took the money.
So then this, to the next question pertaining to bias, you have the issue of Antifa versus the Proud Boys and Patriot Prayer.
Real quick, if you want to see a thorough investigative video as to how Antifa stands in direct violation of Twitter's terms of service, which reveals Twitter's bias on this issue, click the info button in the top right corner of this video next to the pause icon.
Mm-hmm. And Twitter permanently excised anyone associated with the Proud Boys, Antifa accounts who have broken the rules repeatedly, branded known cells that have been involved in violence, all still active. Is there a reason?
Well, with the Proud Boys, what we were able to do was actually look at documentation and announcements that the leaders of that organization had made and their use of violence in the real world. So that was what we were focused on. And subsequent to our decision, I believe the FBI also designated them.
That's not true.
It's not true?
That's not true.
No.
Okay.
No, that's not true.
She was about to say that the FBI designated the Proud Boys as a violent extremist group, as was reported by numerous news outlets, but the FBI would later deny this claim. Now, remember the words, violent extremist group.
Antifa shows up with crowbars, bats, and balaclavas with weapons. And so I have to wonder if these people are allowed to organize on your platform. Are you concerned about that? Why aren't they being banned when they violate the rules?
Yeah, absolutely. We're concerned about that. Has the FBI designated them as a domestic terrorist organization?
Now, Tim asked 2 questions here. 1, are you concerned about this? And 2, why are they still allowed on your platform? She quickly dismisses the first one with a blatantly disingenuous affirmation, and this is now the second time Tim has had to ask why Antifa is still allowed on Twitter. How does she answer? She doesn't. Instead, she asks him a question to get him talking. But there's one thing that's very suspicious in what she says here. Do you recall those words I told you to remember? Before this clip, she was going to say that the FBI designated the Proud Boys as a violent extremist group, per the false news reports. But here, in asking about Antifa, she switches terms from violent extremism to domestic terrorism. Now, she already knows the answer to this question, because the reports on Antifa designations by federal cabinets don't use the terms violent extremism, like did the false reports about the Proud Boys, but of domestic terrorism. In fact, as we're about to see, Vijaya here already knows the answer to multiple questions she asks in this conversation.
Homeland Security in New Jersey has listed them under domestic terrorism.
Okay.
And they sell merchandise. They've appeared in various news outlets. They've expressed their desire to use violence to suppress speech. Is it a centralized organization the same way that I hear you on Proud Boys, but like where they have like tenets that are written out and there's a leader and like... So while I recognize it's much easier to ban a top-down group, there are, the difference I guess is when you look at the Proud Boys, it's straight top-down vertical. You look at Antifa and there's different cells of varying size and they're different accounts. But if you look at a specific channel that's got 20,000 followers that cheers them on, right? These are people who throw mortar shells into crowds. Isn't that advocating for, terrorism, incitement to violence?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I guess the question is, how come they don't get removed?
Well, in the past, when we've looked at Antifa, we ran into this decentralization issue, which is is it a centralized organization? Is it a centralized organization? Well, in the past, when we've looked at Antifa, we ran into this decentralization issue, which is we weren't able to find the same type of information that we were able to find about Proud Boys, which was a centralized leadership-based documentation of what they stand for. But absolutely, I mean, it's something that we'll continue to look into. And to the extent that they're using Twitter to organize any sort of offline violence, that's completely prohibited under our rules, and we would absolutely take action.
Okay, so a third time's the charm because she finally gives an answer to the question. But it's still predictable and full of holes. Never once do they reference Twitter's rules page or page on violent extremist groups. Centralization is not a necessary condition for a violent extremist group to be banned from Twitter. She doesn't want to stay on this topic for obvious reasons, but if she did, the strongest defense she could offer is that the Twitter rules specify that Twitter accounts are prohibited from affiliation with violent extremist organizations. And since organizations require centralization that Antifa doesn't have, they don't stand in direct violation against Twitter's terms of service. The glaring flaw in this centralization defense is that when you yonder over to their page on violent extremism, it says, we prohibit the use of Twitter's services by violent extremist groups, which is a much broader category than an organization, the latter of which requiring a kind of centralization and the former of which not. The page also states, we will not tolerate groups or individuals associated with them who engage in and promote violence against civilians both on and off the platform, which is a statement that perfectly describes Antifa. The other part of her defense was to claim that they couldn't find condemning documentation with stated tenets and purposes. But that's either 1, another lie to cover up their obvious bias, or 2, gross incompetency. Again, check out the other video I referenced before in this issue, because if I, a random YouTuber, can do her job better than she can, then she should really learn to code.